Hi everyone and welcome back. Mindy here today for Neat and Tangled, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how I did this watercolor background for my Receding background stamp set from Neat and Tangled. Here is a look at the liquid watercolors that I'll be using. These are Dr. P.H. Martin's Hydrus Fine Art watercolors. These are very vibrant and honestly, I'm absolutely loving them. I typically do not do any watercoloring. I have some Gansai Tombi watercolors and they just weren't really impressing me. And a friend gifted me these watercolors. I thought I would have a lot of fun trying them out, and I am. So I'm not a watercolor expert, but I am having fun experimenting, and I think that's just part of card making and playing with watercolors. So you can see these are actually plastic containers that I have. They come with an eyedropper as the applicator, which I absolutely love. I think one of the problems I was having with watercoloring is I don't have a lot of control over it, which is a pro and a con to watercoloring. So with the eyedropper, I feel I have a little bit more control over how much of a color I'm adding. And if I want to mix colors, I can add 1 drop, 2 drops. I can also kind of write that recipe down. So for instance, off on the right hand side, I'm making a really deep blue, or it's a bluish purple. And I had experimented beforehand and knew that having a certain number of each color is what's going to give me this deep blue. So I'm just using the Tim Holtz Glass Media Matte to do my watercoloring. You can see I am taping down my watercolor cardstock here. This cardstock is from the B Paper Company. My friend Lisa recommended it, so that's what I'm using. And I'm just holding that down so that my paper doesn't move on me and warp where I can't watercolor on it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to wet my entire cardstock. This is a wet on wet technique. I don't know a lot of technical terms with watercolor, but I do know wet on wet technique is a term. So I started out by just laying down a lot of water on that watercolor paper. I have 2 little glasses up at the top of my screen. One is going to be for my clean water, one is for my dirty water. And I'm just getting my water brush or my paintbrush here wet, and I'll dab off onto my cloth there on the side once in a while if I think I have too much. This is not a fancy brush by any means. I don't even honestly know where I got this. One thing I did learn while kind of experimenting on my own is I did need a brush that was a little bit thicker as far as the bristles, because I wanted to hold my water and my watercolors. I have some thinner ones that just weren't really working out for me, so this one seemed to do the trick, just having those thicker bristles. And I'm just dipping that into my watercolors that I have off on the side there, starting from the bottom, working my way up. Now, the first color I had actually added was Vermilion Hue, which is an orangish color. It's kind of hard to see that on screen, but it is kind of an orangish color. The second one I added was Carmine, which is the reddish. And this third color here is Ultramarine Red Violet. So, in other words, purple. And I'm trying to get a blend between these two colors, so I just go back and forth. I am dipping into my water every now and then to kind of get any of the red off of my paintbrush to just kind of mix those a little bit better. Now, this top one here is the one that I mixed on my own. So this is kind of my own concoction, which is what's really fun about watercolors. And you can see that is a really nice, deep, deep blue. Then I'm going to come in with turquoise blue. Now, this is the straight blue color out of the bottle. And when I added it, I wasn't quite sure how I was feeling about it. That's why I left it for last. And I tried to bring in some more purple to blend that, but it was just kind of seeming like odd man out. It really wasn't fitting. So I'm just going to leave that because I know I can always come back and go over that with a different color. So I'm just going to leave it for now. And once I have these colors on there, I am going to heat set this with my heat tool just to speed up the drying process. And this is one thing I really like about watercolors is I can keep adding colors to increase the intensity of their colors, because when they dry, they do dry back. Even though these watercolors are very vibrant, they're still going to dry back a little bit. So once that is dried down, I'm going to go back and just repeat the same process I did. I'm going to wet my brush, pick up the watercolor, and apply it to my cardstock. Now, if it seems like it's too dry, I just need to pick up some more water. The more water you add to these colors, the more it's going to lighten those colors. That's why it really helps to kind of already have a base down there. So it'll help bring out that vibrancy a little bit. So once I have the purple, I'm kind of going into that turquoise blue because I'm just going to cover that up. I'm trying to create a better transition between that purple and that red. And then what I'll end up doing is actually, once I'm drying it back, I'm just going to take that really dark blue and go over that entire section because I just really wasn't liking how that turquoise was sitting in there. So I'm going to kind of bring that down into that blue a little bit, cover that up. You can wet your brush a little bit more to thin that out, get your colors to spread a little bit easier. And then once I'm happy with it, I'll just remove that purple tape that was holding it down. And that's another reason why I really liked working on this glass media mat for this, is because I can use my heat gun on it and it's not going to hurt anything. Now, my intention with this was I wanted to add a subtle background. I love how this came out. I love how the colors blended. So I just wanted to add this receding background to that, but I just wanted it to be subtle. I didn't want it to really pop. My mistake. So what I did is I prepped my panel with an anti-static powder tool, and then I'm going to use the Gina K Designs embossing ink and just ink up that entire background. I did previously off screen kind of line this up so that the center of the stamp will be more or less centered on my cardstock panel. So once I inked that up, and I did remove the foam piece out of my MISTI. You need to do that when you're using the red rubber stamps because they're already mounted. So I just gave that a good push down. Now, using embossing ink would have been perfect. It's hard to see on camera, but this does leave kind of just a light watermark to it. I'm bringing in this Hero Arts White Satin Pearl embossing powder, and I didn't realize how white it really would be against this background. I've used this embossing powder before, and it never really came out so white until I tried it on this background. But, you know, you go with the flow. I loved my background. I wasn't starting over. So I did go ahead and heat set that with my heat tool. And then once it was dry, I trimmed that panel down to 4 by 5 1/4. And I went ahead and I die cut the word awesome 3 times from some white cardstock. And I did use 110 pound. And then I'm going to use this E6000 spray adhesive. This is odorless. It's a spray. And it holds really, really well. So I sprayed the back of my die cut words with that and then just attached them together. So it's going to be 3 layers high and it's going to give some really great dimension to this awesome sentiment. Once that is ready, I'm just attaching my watercolor panel to a white A2 size note card, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then I'll go ahead and spray that adhesive on the back of this as well, and I can attach my die cut word to the center of my card. And I like to use my tweezers for that because that just helps keep my fingers out of the way. And I can see exactly where I'm lining that up. For my sentiment, I am going to use the skinny strips. So I have the Type Sentiments stamp set here, and I'm just figuring out which one I want to use. And I die cut it out of some black cardstock. And I'm going to line this up in my MISTI tool and stamp my sentiment. Now, one thing I didn't show on camera is I actually sprayed my MISTI mat there with some pixie spray, which is a temporary adhesive. It's just kind of sticky. So that is why my sentiment strip is sticking down in place where I want it. It's just lightly tacky on my mat. And that works out really, really well. Once I have that stamped in some embossing ink, I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle this with white embossing powder. And then I'll go ahead and heat set that. You could use your tweezers or a clothespin to hold your strip here if it's too small. And now I'm just going to cut off that word awesome because this is going to work great with my die cut word I already have on here. So I'm just trimming this down a little bit to fit what I need for the front of my card. Once I have that trimmed down, I can go ahead and add it to my card panel, and I wanted it right at the top there above that letter A. So being that I didn't put anything heavy on this, and this is still a little flexible as far as moving, I just kind of picked that A up a little bit, or the top of it, and I'm tucking my sentiment right under that top part of the letter A. So even though this wasn't exactly what I had in mind, I still really like how this card came out. I love vibrant colors, vibrant cards, so I'm still really liking it. And to finish this off, I'm just adding some sequins from Neat and Tangled around my die cut word. And these are just some clear sequins. You can usually find these in any one of the sequins packs. There's just some really nice clear iridescent ones in there. And then I'm going to fill in the center of them with some unicorn stickles to give it a little bit more sparkle. I hope you enjoyed today's video and taking a look at doing some watercolor backgrounds for your background stamps or even your cover plate dies that you may have. Thanks so much for joining, and I'll see you next time.